And I saw and behold a white horse. It astonishes me to see how many commentators miss the whole point of what he's all about. Why a white horse? It is as we really begin to understand the white horseman, the key event in his life is making a covenant that gets him to power and then breaking it.
Chuck Missler explains the white horse in Revelations. And guys, this is absolutely fascinating. And I will tell you, it's going to blow your mind. So let's get right into it. Shout out to Chuck Missler. He's an inspiration to us all. Let's get into it.
And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. Okay, good. So that's the first of the four seals. Are we together so far?
The four horsemen.
We'll read through just to get the flavor of the next one here. The second seal is the red horse, which represents wars.
Oh, wow.
And when you opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said.
So that's the second one, the red horse. And then the third one's the black horse, which speaks of famine and inflation. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand, measuring something here. And black is often connected with famine, of course. To eat bread by weight is an indictment from Leviticus 26 and other places. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, "A measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine."
Wow.
Scarcity, famine, that's the overtone. There's more, but we'll get into that when the time comes. Okay, so we have white, red, and black. There's one more to come here. The livid horse, the pale horse.
The livid
The
horse.
actual word in the Greek implies chloros. It means green.
Green.
But it's a ugly kind of green.
Like sick.
Speaking of death, naturally. And when he'd opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat on him was Death. And hell followed after him. And power was given unto them over a fourth part of the earth, to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And those beasts are not necessarily 4-footed. They can be microscopic, but they're beasts nonetheless. So that's the fourth one.
Wow.
Okay. Ezekiel 14, we have an interesting verse. It says, "Thus saith the Lord God, how much more when I send my 4 sore judgments upon Jerusalem, the sword, the famine, the noisome beast, the pestilence, and cut off from it man and beast." Wow. There's something else I'd like to highlight, we're just this sort of the warm-up. We'll get to the one we're really after in a minute. But it's interesting to contrast Revelation 6, the whole bunch, and Matthew 24. In Revelation 6, you have the white horse and rider. You have a red horse when you war. You've got the black horse for famine. You've got pale horse for death. You'll have the martyrs that will follow, and then you have the worldwide chaos that comes at next. It's interesting, in Matthew 24, you have false Christ to begin with. You've got wars, famines, death, martyrs, and worldwide chaos.
Yeah.
In the same order. You notice that. There's a parallelism that's, I suspect, deliberate. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's designed that way.
So I have a question. Why do you think they use horses as symbolic or references? Or why do you think he saw a horse? Like, what is the horse reference out of all of this? But it's crazy that some of this stuff was written in Ezekiel as well.
Now, there's another thing I'll call your attention to that may just be a coincidence, but it's still too curious not to mention it to you. The white, red, black, and green are on all the flags of Islam.
Whoa!
What do you do with that?
What do you do with that? Why in the world are all the flags of Islam red, black, green, and white? We have Egypt. I feel like there's more countries now, but Syria, Iran, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon. Imagine.
I don't know. I wouldn't make too much of it.
Right. I wouldn't.
But it's too curious not to make you at least aware of it.
That's just funny.
For what it's worth.
Did you guys know that?
The heptadic structure. Got a 7-seal scroll and you've got the 7 trumpets, again, with each one with their parenthesis, and the 7 bowls of judgment. Okay, fair enough. So we're going to zero in, of course, on the 4 seals: white, red, black, and green. The 4 horsemen. In fact, what really has brought us together, this was all sort of a warm-up. We are going to look at Behold the White Horse. And it may surprise you that I regard him as the mistaken identity. It astonishes me to see how many commentators miss the whole point of what he's all about. Why a white horse? John 5:43 says, Jesus said to them, in John chapter 5, verse 43, he says, I have come in my Father's name, you receive me not. Another will come in his own name, and him you will receive. You're going to make a mistake, in other words. A mistaken identity. See, this rider of this white horse is not Christ. How do I know? Well, first of all, he's in bad company. Look at the 3 guys riding with him.
Wow.
That's not Christ.
Do you guys remember at the Olympics they had the symbolic white horse riding in? That's crazy. That's like a symbolic thing for the Antichrist.
Furthermore, Christ is the one that's opening the seals. He's not a subject of one of the seals. But this guy that's coming will resemble and imitate Christ. That's the point. Wow. And he does it so well that there are many commentators that don't pick up on it. They're also fooled. Furthermore, this one is called forth by the living creatures. That's not appropriate for them to call Christ forward. He's their creator. No. So, and there's going to be a lot said about his career. We'll get into that here shortly. So back to, I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 living creatures said, come and see. That's not quite what he said. He actually said, proceed. Your King James called it come. Erko in the Greek is actually call forth. He's ordered by one of the 4 living creatures. And remember, Jesus is the one opening the seals in the first place. Behold, a white horse. Why a horse? We got all these horses.
That's what I was asking.
Horses are often used to designate judgments, like a force or like a tithe, in a sense.
I see.
And there's lots of examples in your notes. You can track those down and come to your own conclusions.
Isn't that why Jesus didn't ride in on a horse? He rode in on a donkey. It was to symbolize maybe humbleness. I'm completely wrong, but I know horses was to show like you conquered. You'd come in after you conquered something.
But here, apparently, one of his key characteristics is that he had a bow. Of all the things to mention, that's singled out.
A bow.
2 things are mentioned, a bow and a crown, but the bow is mentioned. And most people jump to the conclusion that that's an archery term. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. A bow versus a sword, for an example. The Hebrew is kesheth. In the Greek translation, it's a toxon, which is a bow. And it's not necessarily a tool of archery. That's a very common presumption. It's understandable. But there's something else you need to be aware of that exegetes will highlight to you, and that's what's called the law of first mention. When something is mentioned the first time in the Bible, it turns out to be significant and it has a unique relevance. Let's take a look at those. Law of first mention. The word love. Where's the first place that the word love appears? God uses to Abraham about his son. Because his son is going to be acting out a type of God's son. Because another father is going to offer his son. And that's what Abraham's going to act out, in effect. And he knows he is, by the way. He knows he's acting out prophecy because he names the place prophetically. And Hebrews 11:19 highlights that. So that's love as an example. The first place love shows is where it's referring to the Son of God, and in the context of giving himself to all of us. Wow. What could be more appropriate? The word man, okay, and is that man was made in the image of God. First place man appears is where he's being made in the image of God. Is that relevant? I sure think so.
Right.
Well, what about this bow business? Well, in chapter 9, verse 13 is the first mention of it. God says, I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. Huh. See, you and I don't associate it as a token of a covenant. God does. several times. It's a token of a covenant.
This is why I love Chuck so much. He is just blowing my mind, helping me understand so many things. Some symbolic references to different words that I would have never guessed when I read the Bible. This is so good.
How interesting it is as we really begin to understand the white horseman, the key event in his life is making a covenant that gets him to power and then breaking it. That's going to be a major element of his career we'll get into. The covenant and its breaking is a key identity for him. And we'll see that go. Amos 2:15, neither shall he stand that handleth the bow, and he that is shift of foot shall not deliver himself. Neither shall he that rideth the horse deliver himself. Interesting little allusions here you find when you're watching for them. Okay? And so, the bow. See, the bow seems to symbolize, in addition, the first world leader, which was Nimrod, the hunter. It was a symbol, apparently. And also the final world leader will have the same symbol. He's also an Assyrian.
Wow. So
both the first and last Assyrian seem to be identified together. But when we get to Daniel chapter 9, probably one of the most important, the last 4 verses of Daniel 9 is what Jesus points his disciples to when they ask him about the end times. In the Mount of Olives, 4 guys came to him, Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, Peter's brother. They come and they ask him some questions, and he gives them a briefing, which we call the Olivet Discourse, because it was on the Mount of Olives at night, but that's no big deal, per se, just a label.
Right.
But in those 4 verses, the last verse talks about a week of years. That's pivotal. And it says, he shall confirm the covenant with the many for 1 week. The last week of years. It's the 70th week of a group of 70. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now, this isn't the place to try to unravel the whole 70 weeks. But if you haven't done it, you need to desperately really understand the 70-week prophecy, the last 4 verses of Daniel 9. And that's a study in its own right. I'm assuming that's a review for most of you. But this leader, this world leader, is going to achieve power because he's going to eventually be able to enforce the covenant or confirm the covenant with Israel. The many is an idiom there of Israel. He shall enforce the covenant with the many for 1 week. Okay? That's his commitment. Except, you see, that by the way, it appears to involve temple sacrifice and so on, as we'll see in a minute. But in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So whatever that covenant includes, it may be a lot of other things too, but we know it apparently includes their permission to return to sacrifice, their Jewish sacraments.
Dang. Do you think that the temple will ever start sacrificing again in Jewish custom? Because they don't sacrifice anymore. So is that like a symbolic thing that eventually they will start sacrificing? I know I've seen the red heifer type stories on the internet of them finally trying to bring a red heifer, but this is something that could happen.
In the midst of the week, he shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease. So in the middle of the week, these are weeks of years, he abrogates that covenant. That's a big deal in his life. Jesus is going to point to that when we get to Matthew. Jesus is going to make a big thing of that. We'll get there in a minute. Shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So his enforcement of the covenant seems to include a return to the temple sacrifices for some weird reason. And for the overspreading, and that's what we call the abomination of desolation. That's a term that Jesus used.
Right.
We'll see in just a minute.
Jesus talks about it.
Abomination is a form of idol worship. And the extreme version of that is to put an idol in the most sacred place on the planet Earth. In the temple, in fact, in the Holy of Holies. And we know that because there was a historical event that Jesus makes reference to in using that term. And so, this is the very marker that Jesus calls the attention of the disciples to in the Olivet Discourse. The abomination. So we'll get to that. Let's take a look at it. When you get to Matthew 24, there's a whole bunch of things that are mentioned before you get to verse 15. Wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and divers, all those things. He says, but the end is not yet. Those things are lumped and then described as not being signs. Strange. We always see those lists of signs. Yeah. No, he lists those things that they're coming, but they're not signs. Because they're not, distinctive enough to be a sign. However, when you get to verse 15, he said, by then, he says, these things are not signs. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, which one? Spoken of by Daniel the prophet. He's talking about chapter 9, right here. Stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Wow, there's a lot in this one verse is a big deal. We could spend an hour on this little verse. Okay. You got all these critics that like to argue who really wrote Daniel. I know who wrote Daniel. How do I know? Jesus told me.
Sometimes people think that the abomination of desolation was in 70 AD when the Romans completely conquered Jerusalem and destroyed it, and they did some really heinous stuff in the temple. But what do you guys think?
Anybody that wants to challenge has got bigger problems than the authorship of Daniel. And when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand where? In the holy place. In fact, the Holy of Holies is where it is. And then he adds this little phrase, whoso readeth, let him understand. How many of you read that with me just now? Can I see a show of hands? Do you realize you just picked up an obligation? Jesus said, whoso readeth, let him understand. You now do not have the option of not bringing that to understanding.
Wow.
You need to dig into that till you understand it. Because Jesus tells you to.
But
that's not a little peripheral thing that good people have different views about. No, that's something that you need to understand. Jesus says.
But does everyone understand it?
Okay. It's the key event in the Olivet Discourse. That abomination, that event, the putting up of an idol in the Holy of Holies is what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Is going to puncture that 70th week right in the middle. There was 7 years set aside by the world leader that's going to be violated. He's not going to keep his covenant. He's going to violate that covenant. That's exactly what Antiochus Epiphanes did back in 167 BC. That very thing. He made a covenant and he violated it right in the middle. The pattern was there. By the way, see, this is no longer optional. You've got to do your homework now. Okay? But there's something else here. Did you realize that there's a technology statement in here? I want you to be alert to technology statements. I'm sure if Dwayne Madsen was among us, he would insist, as he's our enterprise architect, and he would insist that we always pay attention where there's evidences of design. Well, there's a technology statement here. Do you see it? When ye therefore shall see the abomination. How can you see something that's in the Holy of Holies? If you're in the mountains of Judea, or you're by the Sea of Galilee, or wherever you are, how can you see an event that's going on inside the Holy of Holies? You can only enter the Holy of Holies once a year if you're the high priest, only once a year, and after great ceremonial preparation. Mm-hmm. No one's allowed.
The internet, video, TikTok, YouTube. That's crazy.
There. But apparently, when ye therefore shall see this thing happen, how are you going to see it? Anyone? On CNN or BBC. It's going to be televised.
Wow.
It's a big event, man. Apparently. It's going to get public attention. And when you see that happen, oh boy, you get some instructions to follow here. What do? Then let them which be in Judea, not in the holy place, them which be in Judea, flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of the... Realize the housetop was typically the guard. It was on a hillside. So often your roof is at street level. So if you're leaving, you leave from the roof, strangely. He that's on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. The Missler translation is, you split and you split now. Okay? Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. And pray that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. That tells you something about his audience. He's assuming his audience is Jewish. If it was Sabbath day, it wouldn't bother us. No, he's assuming he's talking to Jews. It's talking to Jews. Luke 21 is not. That's during the day in the temple. It's a different, very similar, but very different presentation with a different conclusion. Many people think Luke 21 is part of the Olivet Discourse. No. But let's move on here. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. He's quoting from Daniel 12, actually. But he is labeling the last half of that 7-year period. It's split in the middle by the abomination of desolation. 3.5 years before, 3.5 years after. He labels the last half the Great Tribulation. Where does it get that label? From Jesus here in Matthew 24. For then shall be great tribulation, such as not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever would shall be. You mean to tell me it's going to be worse than the Nazi Holocaust? Absolutely.
That's crazy.
By a factor of 2 to 1. How do I say that? The first Holocaust, we know of from World War II, took apparently about 1 Jew in 3. About 1/3 of Jewry perished in the so-called Holocaust. Zechariah 13:9 says the next one will take 2 out of 3.
Wow.
And because I read that on the radio, the Anti-Defamation League has labeled me an anti-Semite. I think they've corrected that. I think they've got enough mail that straightened that out. But anyway.
That's crazy. So guys, absolutely mind-blowing information. Fascinating stuff. Chuck Missler is such an inspiration. I would love to know what you guys think and your opinions on all of this. It's all so fascinating. Thank you guys so much for watching. I encourage you to keep on trusting in Jesus through it all. There's crazy times ahead of us, but God is good, and we can always trust in Him that His will be done in our lives and in other people's lives, so we don't have to be afraid. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't, and please like this video. Have an amazing day. Remember, Jesus loves you.